So, welcome everybody to this career coaching SIG. So happy you joined us. So happy it's your first time with this career coaching SIG for quite a few of you. For this episode, we're actually talking through AI and the art of it with executive coaching with Dan Tabor. I want to introduce you to Dan Tabor. He is a seasoned leader that has taken on strategic roles at global tech companies, and he has spearheaded initiatives in responsible AI and safety. He's led global teams and developed leaders in the technology, academic, and nonprofit organization space. And he brings a unique perspective to that intersection between technology and organizational change. And I literally asked him to come here because I knew he dealt in AI ethics. And I thought we could learn a whole lot of something, something. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be here. Is everybody hearing me okay? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so as Tiffany said, I'll be talking about AI and the art of executive coaching. When Tiffany first came to me with this idea, I just immediately fell in love with it because it basically combines all the different things that I love. I love coaching and personal development just in my own career. Total data geek. I love data and AI. Love Tiffany, and I also love public speaking. And I really enjoy conversations like that I hope can be really interactive. It's often find the best talks are the ones that are more interactive, where I often learn from the audience as much as I teach. So I'm really looking forward to just having an open discussion about what role AI can play in coaching in general. Just to give you a sense of how the talk's going to be organized, it's basically broken down into 3 sections. The first part that I think is really important is just to clarify, what do we even mean when we say AI? Because the reality is it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, and people will use it interchangeably to reference different things that have nothing to do with each other. So I think it's important just to get on the same page about what are we even talking about when we reference artificial intelligence. Then the second part will get into how various types of organizations are using AI today. And that's going to be a mix of good, bad, and ugly. That's going to be a common theme you'll see throughout this presentation of there's a lot of positive applications of AI. There's also some cases where it's gone wrong. And there are some cases where it's gone very wrong and can actually do harm. And want to make sure everybody's aware of all three. And then the last part, which will particularly be more interactive, is just discussing how you all could be using AI most effectively in your work and with your clients. Tiffany already gave some background, but as she said, I'm the head of research and insights for Spotify, although I don't represent them in this talk. And I've been doing a mix of research in AI and data science for about 15 years now in a mix of different sectors. I was in academia for a while as a professor, but decided to make the switch to technology about 7 years ago. And that's when I first met Tiffany, who helped me get my first job in technology. I've been working in AI ever since. And because I don't like talking work all the time. I'm also a marathon runner. Recently completed the Vancouver Marathon, which is my 16th. Huge bread baker. I hate cooking, but my partner convinced me a few years ago, like, you're very precise, and people who are very precise love baking. So I've been very into baking bread ever since then. Also a huge world traveler. My latest trip was to Bhutan last November. If you're ever even thinking about Bhutan, I highly recommend going. So with that, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into what Tiffany mentioned about my background in AI ethics, or what's more commonly known as responsible AI now. It started when I was working at Indeed a few years ago, and basically pitched the idea of the company launching a new program in responsible AI. And this came out of recognizing that the company, like all tech companies, was using a mix of AI and machine learning to, in the case of Indeed, help people get jobs. But companies were increasingly recognizing that there was potential harm in doing this. There was an infamous incident around that time where Amazon was using an internal resume screening tool that was AI combing through resumes to identify the best candidate, and was found to actually discriminate against women. And this was happening on Amazon, not Indeed, but I recognized there was a risk of something like that happening. It was really important that we address these potential harms. So I convinced the company to invest in building out a responsible AI program that still exists to this day. And the goal was basically to recognize that AI is here to stay, and there's a lot of good things that can happen with it, but there are potential ways that it could go wrong in ways that would negatively impact specific groups, like in that Amazon example. And we had to recognize that and address it proactively. So as part of that, I was a two-time fellow in AI ethics at Harvard in a program that was designed to bring together people from industry and academia to talk about these um, larger issues around how we utilize AI. So this will be a theme throughout the talk of kind of, again, recognizing what's good about it, how you can be utilizing it while acknowledging that there are potential downsides. So with that, like I said, it's going to get very confusing what AI even means. Um, it really depends on who you ask. These three examples I give in this slide are just three of dozens, probably hundreds of examples you could find on the web for how different organizations define artificial intelligence. I won't bother reading through them all, but they all generally revolve around the idea of AI being using machines to do things that humans historically would have done. So taking basic tasks, whether it's screening resumes, playing games like playing chess, coming up with recipes, like things that a human would have historically done, and having a computer do it instead. That's the general idea of pretty much most definitions. But there's still a lot of ambiguity in that and what it truly means. And there's also a lot of dispute over what it covers exactly. But one thing that is completely indisputable that I just want to get out of the way, people definitely use AI as a marketing term to sell stuff. This was very apparent to me actually when I first met Tiffany. I was, like I said, I was trying to get into the tech industry. And one thing that really stood out to me was that there were definitely a lot of newer technologies at the time that weren't familiar to me. But there were also a lot of companies that were advertising themselves as AI that were simply using tools that have been around for decades. I mean, there were things that I had learned in graduate school and been using for years that we never called AI, and they were just being called AI now to basically help companies sell things. And even more extreme than that, there are cases where companies that advertise themselves as AI are doing things that I could do not, I could do with a hand calculator. And there's no question that this happens all the time. To the point that the SEC has actually recently started to take this on more and recognizing that companies are really going overboard with what they call AI washing and really exaggerating their claims about what their AI is capable of doing. So they've gone after some companies recently that were just making misleading claims about how they were using AI in their platforms. So I do want to call this out as something that does happen a lot. But with that said, definitely not everything is hype. And in the last 24 months, 18 to 24 months, there's really been a fundamental shift in what AI really means and what it's capable of doing. It really all started back in November 2022, back when OpenAI released ChatGPT, which I'm guessing everybody here has heard of. ChatGPT is a virtual chatbot that's designed to simulate human dialogue. It's kind of similar to chatbots that we've all interacted with on various, what in the past you might have engaged with a customer service agent. Now it would more likely be a chatbot that's trained to answer questions within a particularly narrow range. That's what historically would have been used. But ChatGPT was fundamentally different because although it may look the same, you could ask it almost any question and get some sort of answer. And it does this by utilizing technology called large language models, or LLMs, that you also may have heard of, which are computational models that learn to understand and generate text by just processing vast amounts of language data. So basically, I can throw any text at ChatGPT, just ask it a basic question like, hey, can you plan a vacation for me? Or how would I bake this kind of bread? And it'll produce an answer. And it does that by just processing all the text that it can possibly get access to in the world. So this was really a huge expansion of what past chatbots would have been capable of doing. And it was interesting when this was released that it went viral in under a week, signing up over 1 million users in the first 5 days. And if you talk to the people that created it, they're actually really perplexed, like why this happened, because the technology they were releasing in ChatGPT, it was actually just the latest iteration of something that had been around for a couple of years already. It wasn't something groundbreaking. So they were actually genuinely confused, like why did ChatGPT go viral when this technology had actually been around for a while? But it did. And since then, a variety of tech companies have produced similar assistants. Some other popular ones include Claude, which is the one produced by a company called Anthropic. Google released their own, now known as Gemini, recently. And there's also been an expansion of other generative AI tools, such as DALL-E, which is more about video creation and image creation. And this really represented a total shift in what we meant by AI. Because in the past, and I'm going to make this distinction here of traditional versus generative AI, what was traditional AI, and this is what I say, what I was seeing companies doing when I first got in the tech industry, what it's designed to do is typically predict specific behaviors or specific characteristics that a user may have. And it's designed to do very narrow and very specific things. And as I said, these are technologies that have, in many cases, have really been around for decades. And it's just the increase in computational power, as well as access to data, that's made these models, traditional AI models, more powerful in recent years. But they can typically only do very specific things, which I'll give examples of in a second. What's known as generative AI, which is what ChatGPT represents, is totally different because it's used to actually create new content, often text or audio or video content. It's much more versatile than traditional AI would be. It can handle a much wider range of tasks. And it really does represent a totally different technology and models that have improved exponentially in recent years, like these large language models that I mentioned. So this is just a total change in like how models, what kind of tasks they're being used for. Back in say 2022, what AI would have meant was executing very specific tasks like things that I list here. So it could go through a set of resumes, screen them, and identify what a model considered to be the best candidates. It can recommend specific movies to you, like if you have a Netflix account and Netflix is always suggesting, hey, I think you would like this movie. Again, that's a very narrow, defined task, but predicting a specific user's behavior in a specific task. And then it can find pictures of cute cats like mine. That's an actual picture I took of my own cats. That's Cricket on the left and Opal on the right. So it would be able to screen like millions of images and say, these are the two cutest cats on Earth. That's what AI would have been able to do 4 years ago. In 2024, it's really different because rather than just screen resumes, AI would be able to actually design resumes. And rather than recommend a specific movie to you, it could write a screenplay for you. And rather than screen pictures of cats, it could just create pictures of cute cats. So in this case, the picture in this image, or in this slide, I also created that one. And I created it on ChatGPT by saying like, hey, can you just create a picture of two cute cats for me? And then we did a little back and forth. Like the first picture, they weren't particularly cute or they didn't look happy. I said, hey, can you just make them smile a little bit more, look a little bit happier? And we just engaged in a little bit of back and forth, went through a few rounds of revision, and that's how I ended up with the picture on the right. So this is a total shift in what AI really means. And pretty much everything I'm going to be talking about in this presentation today is really more about generative AI, which is what has gotten so much buzz in the last 2 years. Definitely want to acknowledge that as generative AI really exploded in both power and popularity, it really sparked a variety of reactions in the last 2 years. Some people are incredibly excited about it and hyping it up as what they call a general purpose technology, making analogies between generative AI and the steam engine or electrification. These are inventions that just fundamentally change society. Because of the widespread use and just how communities were structured. It's just completely overhauled the world as we knew it. And some people believe that generative AI is going to have the same impact. And if anything, the impact would just be felt much quicker because of the ease of diffusion. So there's definitely been a lot of enthusiasm for the positive impact that it could have. At the same time, there's also been some amusement in the reactions because generative AI does a lot of things well. It also does a lot of stupid things. Google recently released, I'm sure most people have seen it by now, these AI overviews, where in the past, when you just Google something, like you enter a search query, you would get like a list of sites. Now you'll get some sort of AI generated summary at the top, oftentimes. And a lot of times these summaries are correct, but sometimes they spit out just ridiculous things. And this incident happened a couple months ago where I forget how it came out, but I think somebody somehow discovered that if you asked it how to like I'm making pizza but the cheese keeps falling off, how do I get to stick? Google's AI overviews actually suggested that you add glue to it. It literally said add some glue, mix about 1/8 a cup of Elmer's glue in with sauce. It was careful to recommend non-toxic glue. But this was literally the response that Google suggested. And this is just one of many cases where AI's made some pretty ridiculous suggestions that oftentimes just if nothing else, it provokes a lot of amusement, but sometimes outrage. And there was definitely outrage and anger, particularly in Hollywood, in response to how AI would potentially affect the entertainment industry. You know, the Hollywood strikes last year were largely about AI and how it could potentially disrupt the entertainment industry, replacing, as I mentioned, it is capable of writing screenplays and could it potentially replace screenwriters? There's also concern about being able to distinguish between human generated content versus AI generated content, that a lot of people are concerned about the long-term impact of this, or even the immediate impact of it. So there's been this enormous range of reactions that you've seen. Um, and there's also really an ongoing debate over how good AI really is. I picked out three books here that were all written within the last 6 months or so that kind of represent a spectrum of different views on how powerful AI is. The one on the left is called The Singularity is Nearer. And the reason it's titled that is because the author originally wrote a book called The Singularity is Near a few years ago, or several years ago, I think. Um, and he made a lot of predictions long ago about how AI was going to develop, and his predictions turned out to be largely right. And he's now written a new book saying that AIs are basically going to be better than humans at everything by at least the end of the decade, if not sooner. So that's somebody who's very bullish on AI. In the middle, I'd say the author of this one is a researcher at Penn, who I'll reference a couple other times. And he wrote this book called Co-Intelligence a couple months ago that he's overall also pretty bullish and saying AI definitely is useful, makes a lot of mistakes, but it is a valuable tool that we should all be figuring out how to integrate into our lives. And then that book at the right is not quite as bullish. It's not totally anti-AI, but it's called AI snake oil for a reason. It's calling out that a lot of AI applications are really overhyped and a lot of them are just never going to work. And just from my own perspective, my LinkedIn feed nowadays is 80% of it is posts about AI. And I'd say that those 80% pretty much fall into these three buckets about equally. I see some people who post like, oh my God, AI is amazing. It's going to make the world so much better. There's people who say AI is really powerful, but oh my God, it's going to do so much harm. And then there's people who say AI is stupid. What are you talking about? It's not any good at all. And it's really been fascinating to see this continue. And just in the last couple of days, the authors of both the second and third books have posted things presenting very different views on the power of AI. And it's a subject that's really continuing to evolve. So with that, I kind of wanted to pause and just take a poll of people where how do you personally feel about generative AI? Like, is it something that you get excited about or worried or both or neither?
And it's so much of a race. I'm watching the numbers come in and it's
Yeah.
like excited versus both.
Yeah, I was expecting votes to trickle in over a minute or so, but people
But
obviously have immediate reactions.
yes, gonna share that for everybody now.
It's looks like most people at least some excitement. I'm curious if somebody who's feeling excited about AI doesn't mind speaking up and how they feel about it. Like, what is it that makes you excited?
Yeah, you can come off mute, hop on camera, post in chat. What makes you excited about AI? Saving time. I don't know. We're a fan of those cats, though. I will point that out. Supplemental tool to assist. So the saving time, making work easier. That's part of what's come up here in the chat at the very least. So people are camera shy or shy with their voice, but um, keeps them in higher level thinking is also what's being posted here.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that one. Do you mind elaborating a little bit, Kevin?
Yeah, Dr. Kevin.
Oh, can you hear me now? So yeah, so what I would say, Dan, is so I've been playing with this for a long time, and then actually just finished a course last Saturday on getting certified for doing AI kind of stuff. I think what I found is a good portion of my time as a coach or as a kind of a leadership expert in training is that I spend a lot of time on the tactical execution, bits and bytes. And what I found is by using AI, it will do 80% of that for me. So that additional time that I have, I can really kind of sit back, look at things holistically, and think about other than just tactical execution. I can really think about, so what does this mean? How does this affect my clients? What should they be thinking about? What patterns do I see? And I think that's a better use of my time than just kind of doing the tactical execution, which has always taken about 80% more of my time than the strategy.
Yeah, I think there's some similarities between what you were saying and what others have posted about it's and what I've heard from others too. It's often good at kind of taking care of the more menial tasks that you don't want to have to deal with. And that's something that will come up later too.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing, Dan, that I found is it has sparked it's forced me to do some additional level of research. If I go in and I'm working with a client right now who's having a challenge with quote executive presence, and I've gone in and used Chat GPT 4.0 to give me some ideas and do some prioritizations. And where it does prioritizations that seem kind of out of whack to me, it's forced me to go back into the university libraries and do some additional research to get a deeper understanding so that I can convey that other than, hey, here's my opinion. So I think it's really good mental challenge for me. So I enjoy it, but then again, I am a complete tech nerd. So I know that's not for everyone.
What about those who feel at least a little bit worried? What are the concerns that people have?
I'm happy to jump in on that one. My concerns are really, the potential for fraud and misrepresentations and recreating likenesses that are literally indistinguishable from reality. And I mean, it's happening now, clearly, but, and just the broader stuff for security, um, national security, internet security, privacy, just really the implications of using it. Uh, I can't think of the word, but not using it, appropriately. That's my biggest concern of what the potential implications could be.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be giving some examples of that later, but do you have some specific examples for others who may not be as familiar?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking, even on the political front right now, creating ads or what it looks like somebody's saying, and it's not them saying, it's creating their likeness that's saying it. I'm trying to think of other, I'm in the legal industry. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and the implications there. But that's kind of what there's more, but it's not coming to my mind. But that's the area I'm really thinking about, people that can create your voice, right? And they can literally replicate that and make calls and sound like somebody else, sound like your kid, sound like your parent, sound like something, those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
I will
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I noticed that anytime you like add new videos to YouTube, they now filter for that, or they ask you, like, are you making anybody say something that they didn't really say? And even there's supposed to be this limit for if you produce books with AI, you have a limit to how many you could publish on Amazon, I think it was. So I see some of that like filtering into the filters.
Any other concerns that others have? Okay. If not, we can move on because I'll be covering plenty of both in the next section. Like I said, both the good and the bad. So I'm just going to give some examples of how different organizations are using AI. I want to caution right from the beginning that reality is it's still really early. And I think organizations are still figuring this out. This post that I shared. It's the author of that book, Co-Intelligence, and he posted this just a couple days ago. And like I said, he's relatively bullish on the potential of AI. But he was saying, even in his recent talks to companies, everybody's talking about it, but people are still figuring it out. He was saying less than 10% of people have actually tried GPT-4. That's one of the more recent versions of it, and less than 2% have spent time on what so-called frontier models that are more advanced. So you can get the impression by all the talk that's happening on LinkedIn and other venues that everybody's doing it, when the reality is companies are still figuring this out. The author of that third book that I mentioned was just posting a long thread on X last night about how his opinion was that a lot of the early movers like OpenAI and Anthropic, as well as Microsoft and Google, maybe moved a little bit too fast before companies had really figured out the product market fit, if you will, and that a lot of the companies really don't know at this point how they're going to utilize it. So I want to start with that caution that whatever I say now could easily change in the next few months. But what I'm noticing so far is that the case studies that really stand out are often companies that are more in the position of creating new content from using AI. So Shopify is one example of a company that's using tools, what they call Shopify Magic, that can take text that you enter and use it to generate either product descriptions or also product images. Like in this particular case that you see on the slide, person just enters the text prompt, a snowy pathway. So it provides this image of two boots and says, I want to see it on a snowy pathway. And then the Shopify Magic will generate this new image that's a little bit more visually stimulating. And then there's also Shopify Sidekick, which is more of a support chatbot for merchants to answer questions. Adobe is another one that's really embraced it pretty early. Adobe Firefly can similarly take text prompts, like in this case, tallest mountain in the world at night with the northern lights. So you can give it a pretty vivid description of what you want to see, and then use it to generate new images or modify existing images. Personally, I use Adobe a lot, like Adobe Lightroom specifically. And definitely early on, I was noticing like a lot of hype within Lightroom about how they were using AI. And to be honest, initially I was a little bit skeptical, but I have noticed with its ability to like just take things out of images that I don't want to be in there, that its capability to do that has really improved substantially from where it was a couple of years ago. So the companies that are utilizing it most effectively are often in this position of just using it to create or enhance new content in some form, whether that content is text or audio or video. Another compelling case study is education. This was one of the immediate reactions that people had when ChatGPT was first announced of, oh my God, this is just going to destroy education because students are going to use it to cheat. And I remember hearing an interesting podcast with somebody not too long after that it was a teacher who was saying, no, actually, I think this is a good thing because I can use it to enhance my teaching. And there was a recent study done by RAND where they surveyed different educators and represented that similarly, like a broad range of reactions that people have had to it. They found that 18% of K through 12 teachers were using AI for teaching. So definitely there were some adopters, but there were, I think it was maybe 44% that weren't using it at all. And a smaller minority said they would never consider using it, if I remember correctly. The ways that they were using it were often as part of virtual learning platforms, like Google's created this Google Classroom, or adaptive learning systems like the Khan Academy. They also surveyed teachers on what they were using it for, and the most common uses they found were either adapting instructional content to fit a particular level, or again, to generate new materials. Again, that's a theme over and over, that generative AI is particularly good for just creating new types of content, whether it's educational or marketing. But then there's the big question of how does it affect coaching, which is what this is really about. And there's always that question of like, could AI replace jobs? And in this case, could it ever replace coaches? This figure you see on the right is one example of where companies are using AI for coaching. And I did a lot of research into how different companies were using AI for coaching, and I found that they generally fell into a couple of different categories. There were companies that already were coaching companies or organizations that were now creating new AI tools. So Amy is one example that came out of Coach Hub. Ren is another one that came out of a company called Refound. This was a long existing coaching company that was now figuring out how AI could potentially supplement the work that their coaches were already doing. Career Village was another in creating an AI tool called Coach that was designed to supplement the work that already happens. So the companies that were kind of coaching first organizations that now are incorporating AI into their work. And then as a complement to that, there's really tech first companies, I'd say, that are offering AI tools for coaches. Like Poised is one that I was looking at just this morning that I think was had to do with, I think, listening to a recording, somebody giving a speech, for example, or practicing the talk and giving feedback on it. Different tools will do a variety of things, but they generally fall into three different categories. This is I got from a blog that's shared at the bottom. There's kind of different ways that they use AI. There's the blog summarized it as AI supported versus AI augmented versus AI as the coach. AI supported is where you're using AI to just get insight into what a particular client may need and then provide recommendations to them. I'd say this is a little bit more along the lines of what traditional AI would have been. And it could be, for example, like taking, if you have a transcript from a coaching session, taking that, processing all the text in there, identifying what needs maybe you didn't recognize, and giving recommendations to a client. So that's one potential application. AI augmented refers to cases more where an AI tool is interacting with the client in between coaching sessions. So this is just recognizing that a coach can't be there all the time, but you want to be able to interact with them. You want the client to be able to get support in between sessions, and using an AI tool to do that. And then AI as the coach represents cases where, yes, the AI actually is the one coaching, like there isn't a human coach involved. And going back to the previous slide, I'd say the cases where it's a coaching first company, they kind of fall into the ones that are tech first companies are really more the AI supported ones, where it's using AI to support coaches in some way. But I'd say the ones, particularly Ren and Refound and Career Village, were more really embracing the idea of AI as a coach. And my impression from looking into those organizations was it was kind of recognizing there can't possibly be a coach for every employee who needs one. So this is a way to scale their efforts. The CEO of the Refound he has a video on his website where he just openly says, like, we want to be able to reach more people, but there's no way to scale the individual coaching we do. So this is a way to have a bigger impact, was how they looked at it. That company, as well as Career Village, seemed to approach it more that way, that it was more about increasing the scale of coaching, whereas Coach Hub seemed to approach it more as AI augmented and being able to provide coaching services in between sessions. So different companies are approaching it in different ways. Depending on the product and the company, these tools can do a variety of things. The exact example is really going to depend on what type of product it is. Again, a lot of times it's just generating content, whether it's writing blogs or writing training modules or generating really any type of content. Sometimes, like I said, it can be summarizing notes from a client session. Like if you have a transcript and you want to digest it into a smaller summary and possibly extract insights from that summary. As I mentioned, it can potentially be providing content to clients in between sessions, interactive sessions. And then, as we've talked about a little bit already, it can also just help with some of the more basic administrative tasks. This wouldn't necessarily be specific to coaching. There are definitely a lot of companies out there that advertise themselves. They may market to coaches, but the services they offer through their tools are really not specific to coaching. It's just helping with any type of administrative tasks that would apply to a lot of companies. So if you just do a basic Google search on what are the best AI tools for coaches, my experience is you'll find a lot of them are really that last one of just basic AI tools that could help you regardless of what your profession is. But there's really wider applications and things that are more specific to coaching. So and now I've spent the last few minutes kind of talking about all the good things that AI can do. So might be thinking what could possibly go wrong, but obviously we've already started to hint at some things that can go wrong. Just going to pause 1 second for drink.
I can also share there was something in chat. Somebody was concerned about how this could be used, especially with a generation, Amy's mentioned, a generation of not learning critical thinking skills.
Yeah, that's a great point. Especially if you moved more in the direction of leaning exclusively on AI as coaching. What do others think about that?
Andrew was mentioning that he's team neither. He sees it as a new, quite powerful tool. And he's in the place of figuring it out and seeing what's available to it. And Andrew, feel free to, jump in and say more about that.
Sure. Tiffany, first of all, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, I'm not excited. I'm not worried. I see this as a new tool, and it's so new that we're just figuring it out. Like Dan said, there's a lot of hype about it. It's kind of the flavor of the month or the year. And I really appreciated Dan saying that, people are using the label without it really being AI. There's always a gap when there's a new technology or a new tool where there's kind of a disequilibrium. And we're in that place right now, in my opinion. And I think it's a matter of we're going to figure out how to best use it. It's going to be challenging because it's, hitting a moving target. As soon as we understand how to use it, I think AI is evolving so quickly, we're going to be playing catch up. But I, I'm just, anticipating what's going to happen. And I think over time, the problems, the worries that we'll have will become more explicit. And hopefully, people will use their critical thinking skills, to figure out how to best use it and how to reliably use it, and how to discover if there are any bad actors using it.
Yeah. Even Hugo just put in chat. The concern is that there might be less connection with people, and I might say it as less connection with other humans.
Yeah, many people have made the analogy between where we're at right now and the movie Her. And I've seen a lot of I've seen even that issue, the idea of like AI as a human companion and even providing therapy, like even that I've seen a variety of reactions from people who I respect. Like some people are very outraged by that idea, the notion that like AI could provide therapy, and others say like, hey, in an era where the Surgeon General has said loneliness is an epidemic, like don't you want to use all possible tools to try to address that? So these are very controversial questions that don't have simple answers. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on really diving deep into acknowledging the things that can go wrong with these applications. As I said, I've been working in the responsible AI space for many years. Traditionally, I was already bringing up concerns about potential harms. I mentioned one with discrimination. Lack of transparency is another issue. What they call the term black box is used a lot to reference the fact that a lot of times these models just produce these predictions or produce this content, and even the people who design the model have no idea where it came from, and they just don't understand it and wouldn't be able to provide an explanation of where this came from. And that's concerning to a lot of people. There's also the concern about negative applications like AI being used for autonomous weapons. These are problems that existed already with traditional AI. And I'd say that generative AI has raised the same concerns and even more. I do want to kind of double down on the discrimination angle because I can't emphasize enough that models are designed to pick up on patterns that exist in the real world, and the real world is very biased, and thus models are often going to perpetuate those biases. I've already given the example of Amazon's resume screener that specifically what it was doing was it was screening resumes for software engineering roles, and it was basically just picking up on the pattern that most software engineers are men. So it was tending to favor men in this resume screening and discriminating against women in the process. And Amazon got a lot of flack for this, but in reality, it's something that could easily happen with any model. Microsoft's Tay chatbot that was years ago before generative AI really exploded. It was another infamous example because it was released and it was designed to interact with people. And within, I think, 24 hours, it was producing, like, if I recall correctly, like racist and xenophobic comments that it was sort of led into producing, which I think today that would probably be considered, the term jailbreaking is used when you kind of lead a model into doing things that it's not supposed to do, like giving it prompts that'll induce negative behavior. And this is what Tay did several years ago. And then there was also an infamous healthcare model that recommended less care for Black patients. I have a background in public health research, and it's easy to see how this happened because, Black patients historically would have received less care, and thus the model just picked up on that and tended to recommend less care. These infamous examples all happen in the case of traditional AI models, but generative AI models are going to be subject to the same risks where, because they're picking up on patterns, they're just going to potentially perpetuate biases. Another issue that's talked about a lot is you'll often hear the term hallucinations, which is where that's kind of what we were talking about with the pizza and cheese and glue example, where AI will just produce results that are wrong or misleading or just don't make any sense at all. Some other examples are a New York attorney was found to, he had used ChatGPT to do legal research, and he actually presented citations and quotes that didn't exist. Like ChatGPT had just made them up. And obviously that attorney got into trouble for that. Google got a lot of flack when they first released their AI chatbot. In its debut, ironically, it made factual errors about James Webb Space Telescope, again, presenting information that was just incorrect. And then there's been multiple chatbots that have claimed that there was a ceasefire in Israel when there wasn't. Some of the examples are just humorous. People get a laugh out of them, and some of them are really, really serious. But everybody acknowledges that there's often there's a reasonably high probability when you ask ChatGPT or any of these chatbots a question that it's going to give the wrong answer. And then copyright protection is another huge issue that gets talked about a lot. The way generative AI typically works is just scraping the text from countless online sources, and that can include books, articles, any copyright or any creative work that's protected by copyright. And a lot of authors and comedians and media outlets have actually sued companies for copyright infringement. And this is an evolving subject. Like, digital watermarks have been widely discussed as a policy solution to help identify AI generated content, but they're still figuring out what that would look like. Is that even the right solution or not? So this is a rapidly evolving area where people are still understanding the risks and how you would potentially address them. And the technology, frankly, is really evolving faster than anybody's understanding of how to address the risks. So now that we've talked about the good and the bad, kind of want to transition to more discussion about how you all could be using AI. I want to pull in one other quote from that report I cited earlier about the compared generative AI to the steam engine. By one estimate, close to 80% of the jobs in the US economy could see at least 10% of their tasks done as quickly without compromising quality using generative AI. And I think that's sort of the point we're at of trying to figure out what are those 10% for people, like how is it best utilized? And this is where I think it would help to have smaller discussions. So Tiffany, I discussed having kind of breakout sessions at this point to discuss some of these questions around like how you would potentially, can you imagine a scenario where AI could simplify a common task or challenge in your work? Maybe you're doing this already, or maybe you're just starting to think about it. What kind of support you think people would need if you sense that, if you yourself feeling some resistance or sense that others are, what kind of support people would need to successfully integrate it into their lives? And then how could generative AI potentially be used to enhance leadership development within organizations? So that's thinking like beyond how you personally would use it and how you would potentially work with your clients to help them recognize how they could be utilizing it or helping others within their organization utilize it. These are designed to just be kind of discussion starters, not that we have to like go through and address every question, but want to encourage more discussion in the breakout sessions to just talk about how AI can best be utilized.
Absolutely. And one question that came up in chat that could be a breakout discussion is how you're using or what tools you're using when you do use AI. So we're going to have about 10 minutes, but I'll put the questions in chat for you as you join your rooms. So I'm opening all the rooms and you'll have some time to discuss. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes-ish.
We weren't done.
Do tell. What are your
Yeah.
top takeaways from these conversations?
So Tiffany, I'll ask the question because one of the discussions we had in our breakout room was which AI tools do you use in Zoom to do the summaries, because there's several apps that you can load. I'd be curious of which ones people are using and which ones they like.
That is a good question. Oh, Amy's raising her hand. Go for it, Amy.
Yeah, so I'm using one. It's so another coach told me about it. I use it with most of my clients. They're, I tell them it's confidential, it's encrypted and a lot of stuff. It's called Fathom. And it records it, and it also creates a summary of the conversation with the action steps and the whole bit. What I really love about this is that I can be present in the conversation without having to take copious notes. And even though it doesn't always get it right, you then have the recording, and it has like different parts of the recording, and then you can click onto it. And then I listen, I go back and I look at it. I've only had one client that wasn't comfortable with it. And in that situation, I used the Zoom AI, I'll put it in the chat. I used the Zoom AI companion, which you can turn on when you do your Zoom. And it has not been very accurate. And then I was recently on a call where somebody else used the Teams transcription, and it will transcribe. You can transcribe the whole conversation, almost like if you were doing a mentor coach call, something like that, which isn't great because it didn't summarize. But I'll put it in the chat. It's called Fathom, and you can either do a free version. I just upgraded it. You have a free version for a little while. I just upgraded. I think it's like $20 a month for the upgrade. Oops, let's see. I sent it to Tiffany. Let me. Okay, Tiffany. Publish it.
We'll share with everybody.
All right, hold on. Let me send it to everybody. Hold on one sec.
I got you.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I really like it, and my clients like it too, because they can go back. Sometimes we'll capture like a affirmation or something, right? And then they can go back and listen to it also.
So that reminds me, part of what you might want to look at is how the app or the tool uses the data afterwards. Does it store it? Does it, what does it do with it?
Privacy stuff. I went online and looked at it myself, and I even forwarded it to the one client who finally decided she was okay with it. I went, I copied the link and sent it to her, but you definitely want to look at it. But I know a number of coaches now that are using that. That's how it came to me.
What else do people talk about? Y'all are quiet and shy. I appreciate
I'll
it.
say something.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Tiffany. So this isn't so much a tool, but I subcontract with a coaching company who is testing an AI coach. And of course, the coaches who are working with them were very uncomfortable about it. So they did what good companies do. They paid for us to do the AI Essentials course that Google offers, so we can get more comfortable with the idea. And one of the things, I know a lot about AI. I've been a faculty member who've used it. I used it in my coaching. I'm fascinated by it. As an artist, I'm really interested in the visual aspects of it. But what I've learned from that course is all about engineering the prompt. So if you want a table, you say, I want a table. If you wanted to do a summary, you say, give me a summary of, and the more exact, I think, Dan, you mentioned that, but I hadn't realized how important that prompt is. So one way I used it in coaching is I had a client who was sure their boss was a narcissist. And so I said to AI, make me a table comparing narcissist traits with sociopath and I think psychopath. And I couldn't find that anywhere on, in Google searching, which I also took a powered Google searching course once, but it made this beautiful table for me comparing across it. So things like that, but it's all about the prompt.
This is reminding me that Ray Notes has the AI. It uses AI to generate the transcripts. It can also use AI to mark the core competencies, which one of my colleagues mentioned that it's not as good on the later stage, especially for the MCC bars, but the early ones, it really gets down, it seems.
Hey, Tiffany, I don't know if anybody else knows this or not, but Marshall Goldsmith is actually developing his own AI. for the coaching and leadership. And it's available. I forget. I think if you just go to his site, you can find it there, but you can go in and play with it. And I've played with it. It's pretty good, and it's very, very more focused. And he pulls from different LLM than I think the general one. So it's a little more specific. Doesn't do everything, but I think if anybody is in that space, excuse me, you might want to play with Marshall's AI.
And I just found it and put it in chat. So at the end, I'll try to remind everybody to save the chat. Okay. Anybody else want to share what came up during their topics, or what conversations you still have? What questions you still have based on the conversations that you had? And I see like Layla is shared a link to something, and it is asking the question, do you have a real or paid version of ChatGPT to create images and tables? And I'll say that Canva also does some creation of images as well. But are you paying for ChatGPT to make these images?
So I'm fairly sure that you can with the free version. I actually haven't used the free version recently, so I'm not totally sure, but I upgraded to the non-free because there's just such a substantial difference in quality.
Of the information you get back or the pictures you get back?
Just in general, yeah, just everything you get back.
Okay.
And Dan, if question for Dan, if I understand I just upgraded to the paid version, but I haven't played with the image generation. I think the difference is that the free version will do at sample, but it won't do continuous. But I think there's the paid version has an engine built into it to generate images for you. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. I'm not 100% sure because I haven't looked at the free in a while, but
Okay.
that sounds about right.
Yeah.
I had the paid version, by the way. I asked it to help me generate a logo. This logo I have up top, it helped me generate that. I had somebody else help me put it in a different format for the website, but I went through, it took me about 10 minutes to say, I want something with this and with that. I mean, some of it was way off base. And then I just downloaded it. Of course, you have to have somebody put it on transparent background, which I have no idea how to do. But I actually asked it to help me create a logo. You can do that on Canva too, but for some reason, I just felt like playing around with it a while. This was a couple months ago.
Oh, I'm gonna put your LinkedIn into chat so people can see the logo more closely, because that's what I do.
That's funny because I also used it to generate my logo too, but I used Midjourney.
Oh,
What did you use?
Midjourney. I'll put it in the chat.
I have to start sending out the chat like a handout. This was like an okay place to like continue with the presentation. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I am curious before we continue if the subject came up at all, if how to, or if it comes to the extent you can share, if it comes up with the clients, are they unsure about how to use AI and what to be telling them? Is that something any group talked about?
We didn't, but all my clients are in the legal profession, so there's a lot of discussion. You gave one example, right? But there's a lot of discussion how to use it, both in terms of information management and, what tasks, for example, what tasks like associates are not going to need to do anymore, and how to create efficiencies for clients using it, and then how to price that. Because if it's more efficient and it's not taking as much time, how to turn that into product, stuff like that, right? And specific to them, but I think a lot of maybe other companies are thinking about this too. How do you create these efficiencies using it?
Yeah, it has been interesting that I gave the one infamous legal example, but it seemed like the legal industry was one of the first ones to be widely talked about all the different ways that generative AI could affect the industry in good and bad ways.
Yeah, and you mentioned before, Dan, it's been around a long time, like e-discovery and all this stuff. It's just now being taken to another level.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm
And
gonna go back.
one thing
Yeah,
that's interesting is in higher ed, I follow how new technologies and emerging technologies are being used in higher ed. And I was sharing with Amy, I saw something yesterday where a faculty member gave an assignment to their students to write a report. Of course, everybody's really concerned about AI being used to write reports now. And she said, here's the what I'm asking you to do. I have gone to a generative AI, platform, and this is the report they wrote. So if you want to see, improve upon this report. If you want a B, go and tell you what's wrong with the report. If you want an A, write an original report. And I thought that was really an interesting way of doing it, because people say, oh, well, I can't bring AI into the classroom. Well, guess what? How are you going to stop it? It's like when Google came in or online learning. You have to figure out ways to use it where students can think critically and do interesting things with it. I thought that was somewhat novel.
Yeah. It's so funny. My
what though?
last, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that that there's actually websites now that check for AI, so they can give you a percentage of how much was written using AI.
Oh, I did see a writer have a badge that said certified that he wrote his own stuff. And he's a columnist, so that's why that would be important.
It's funny how my last section is going to focus a little bit more on kind of giving tips, but I feel like so much of what you all have said already, you've kind of done my job for me. Whoops.
Will be your AI.
Sorry, somehow my Zoom disappeared.
But we see your screen.
Okay, now we're back. We've done that. Okay, so yeah, the last section is going to kind of focus on, we talked about ways you can use it, but should you be using it? Definitely, I think my overall take, I think, is best summed up by this quote from Indeed's chief economist. And I'm seeing more and more people say a variation of the same thing, that, there's a lot of talk about, is Gen AI going to take away people's jobs? And she says, it won't completely take jobs away, but people who know how to use it will take jobs from people who don't. And I think that summarizes my perspective, and I think a lot of people's perspective, that it's coming. Like, the technology is coming, whether you like it or not, and you're much better off if you learn how to utilize it. I definitely have kind of embraced this book by Ethan Mollick on how to utilize it and his 4 rules for co-intelligence. I'm completely copying these from his book. He says the 4 rules are: always invite AI to the table, be the human in the loop, treat AI like a person, but tell it what kind of person it is. And I think that last one is especially the key. Assume this is the worst AI you'll ever use. So what he's basically saying with these is just always think about, with any task you do day to day. This is what I first started doing when I was really starting to embrace it. Just every single task I do over the course of the day, think about, could I potentially utilize AI for this, and what would that look like? At the same time, recognize it's not going to be perfect with everything. It's going to give you a lot of wrong information. So that's why you need to have that human in the loop, that always be questioning, like, okay, AI sounds really competent, but is it actually giving me the right answers? You do need to, you learn to engage with it a little bit differently. I forget who, but somebody was referencing this, and the importance of how you craft a prompt and how you interact with the AI will really affect the quality of the responses that you get. And then I think, as I said, I think that last point is really key, that even when you see mistakes being made today that make everybody laugh, it's getting started and it's only going to get better. And I think, to me, the really eye-opening part was when I did start to use the paid version of ChatGPT and realized what a difference in quality there was between the free versus the new. And that's when I realized things are getting so much better. So we're still at an early time when people are still figuring out how to use it, but you can be pretty confident the technology is going to keep getting better. And even if you're seeing mistakes now, those mistakes will get less and less with time. So the 3 tips I would have in kind of our closing minutes are: definitely just experiment yourself on your own. It definitely helped me a lot to just get familiar with not just ChatGPT, but the other chat bots that are out there, because they'll have distinct personalities. They're good and bad at different things, and it'll help you get a feel for both how they're different from each other, as well as how they're different from past AI assistants. You may have used Siri or Alexa and others in the past, and maybe you still do, but the way that you interact is really different with these newer tools. I think for getting started, it really helps to just test it out on simple things like planning a vacation. I literally was doing this when I was planning my trip to Bhutan last fall. Was just saying, hey, I'm trying to decide where to go this fall. Here are the things that I'm interested in. What are some good destinations? Kind of narrowed in on Bhutan, and then got some ideas like what are some good hiking trails I want to do, and just kind of gathered information from it that way. What I've personally experienced is that it's really good for kind of generating sort of an MVP for different things I'm working on. And I think that example that you just gave, I think it was Susan, about how it's being used in education is a perfect example where it's often good for getting sort of like a C level performance, and then sort of you can take it to an A from there. So to give a concrete example, in my own life, I'm very passionate about the humanities because I majored in humanities in college. Even though I work in technology now, I feel like majoring in humanities was actually one of the best decisions I ever made. I've been thinking about like how could I potentially help students that are majoring in humanities but interested in technology. But I'm interested in kind of understanding, gathering some more info on what are the challenges they face. So I've thought about like creating a survey just to gather some information. But I had a hard time getting started. So I just asked ChatGPT, hey, here's what I'm interested in doing. Can you design a survey for me? And it just spit out a survey within seconds that if I had done it myself, I probably would have taken 6 months to come up with the same. It wasn't the perfect survey, but it got me going. And it was so much better than anything I could have come up with in such a short amount of time. So that's been my experience of what it's really good at, is just getting the ball rolling and having a sort of baseline product like that. Tip number 2, though, is like it's so important to understand the risks. I can't stress this enough, like especially that first one. You do need to assume that any private information you enter is being used by the company that built the tool. And yeah, this is why I'm very cautious about what I use it for. Like I don't use it for anything work related in my professional job because I can't potentially be sharing information about my own company with it. So I strictly use it for personal things and only share information I'd be comfortable sharing with whoever is on the other side. And that's something that it's definitely important to be aware of. It's easy to get seduced by a chatbot's confidence. Like oftentimes ChatGPT will spit out an answer and sound like so confident in it. But especially the free versions make so many mistakes. And it's not unusual to, I'll ask it a question and it'll say something that's just not correct. And I can respond like, basically, are you sure about that? And it'll respond, oh, never mind. This is the right answer. So it's very easy to get fooled just of how confident it is. And finally, the technology and also bad actors' use of it is evolving very quickly, much faster than how well we understand the technology and how to mitigate it. This is kind of the area I work in, and just understanding what are the potential risks, how do you quantify them, how do you measure them, and how do you mitigate them. And it's a field that's rapidly evolving. Regulations are struggling to catch up as the technology evolves, and it's a field that's going to continue to evolve very quickly. With that, the last tip is, I think because it's evolving so quickly, it's really important to follow the trends, because AI is already disrupting the labor market, even as companies aren't really sure yet what that even means. I remember like when it first came out, like, prompt engineer became a thing in the labor market. Like you started seeing job listings for a prompt engineer. And then now I'm not sure that I still see them occasionally, but now it's not so much, as I think companies realize that's not really a distinct role. But at the same time, you are seeing this huge explosion based on this data from Indeed on jobs that reference the need for AI. But companies are still figuring out what that means. And I think it's going to continue to change over time as the technology evolves. So whether your client's a CEO who's trying to understand how their company should utilize it, or your client is somebody looking for their first job, either way, they're probably wondering how is AI going to affect them. And I think it's important to stay up with the trends, know who the players are, like OpenAI, Anthropic, and others, what tools are being used and how these are changing, and just be aware that these things are probably going to continue to change rapidly in the next couple of years. And that's about it for me. Left a few minutes. If people have any questions or further discussion, you can reach me at either my personal website or on LinkedIn are usually the best places to reach me. I absolutely love this topic because I love tackling complex questions like this, where we know the technology is coming, but we don't know how it's going to be used. How do you utilize it in the best ways while mitigating the harms and figuring all that out? I'm particularly curious about how it's going to affect the coaching industry and just how people develop their careers. So if you ever just want to chat more about it, don't hesitate to reach out to me because it's a topic I love talking about.
And he has an interest in coaching. So there's that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Quite enjoyed exploring this, and I definitely got new ways of looking at this. What questions do others have or comments they want to share? And you can come off mute. Chat or mute, unmute will work.
I didn't realize there was such a difference in the paid version of ChatGPT. I've been using the free version for a year or so. And so I'm going to explore that because maybe I'm spending more time than I need to editing what I'm getting as output. So thanks for that feedback, Dan, and others.
One other thing too, that I haven't done it lately, but I get all these recommendations. You should read this, you should read that. I can't remember like if it's the paid version or not, but there's ChatGPT has a portion, like maybe the paid version where it says books. And I can say, summarize Marshall Goldsmith, what got you here won't get you there. And then it'll give me some of the key stuff. And then it'll say, do you want more details? Give me some little more detail on those things. Of course, you got to be careful, right? One time I was thinking of a quote and I said, what was this quote by Brene Brown? I wanted to include it in some bio I was writing. And it gave me a quote and I started to include it. And then I Googled the quote and it wasn't said by her. It was said by, I don't know, somebody way back in like the 1700s, but they can summarize books. So if I don't know if you guys are overloaded on recommendations of books like I am, but it can summarize the key stuff, like what are some of the key takeaways. And but that may be the paid version ways, I'm not sure.
And Emily is about to check out, and she's saying thank you very much for this being informative. So we are getting a lot out of this topic.
So I have a question for Dan. Dan, you said to assume that the AI companies with the chatbots, will be using your information. Obviously, that brings up questions of confidentiality and coaching. Are you aware of any of the companies that will say, no, we're not going to use your material for learning, for teaching our chatbots anything further? I haven't run into that where they're willing to say, no, we will do something like process interviews for 360s, but we will keep that out of our base of information that we learn from.
Yeah, I'd say I'm not aware of what like public statements companies have made. To be completely candid, whatever they are, I would just come at it from a very cautious perspective of not assuming that you're hearing the full story of how data is being used, simply because I'm not going to name any specific companies, but there have been plenty of historical examples of companies saying we would never use data for so and so, and then did. It was found later. Yeah, I think just this morning, I think I saw somewhere in LinkedIn maybe some report about listing a bunch of companies that allegedly are using data for purposes they said they wouldn't. So I say that just being realistic, that it's better to be cautious regardless of what statements have been made, that companies may be utilizing data in ways that you're not aware of.
Thank you.
Makes me think that it's tied to the leadership team and the vision that they set for the company versus the company itself. In that way, I know that I've been a part of surveys and questionnaires and different things of coaching platforms and companies on how they might be using or thinking about using AI. So I've given my opinion because I have them. So there's that piece to it. And I've also known some companies, I found out from other coaches that they have companies that request that they do use AI. And when they ask their clients, no problem whatsoever. But they hem and haw because they're like, well, what about the ethics of it? And then they have like all this internal dialogue about it. They ask the client's like, yeah, whatever. So it's an interesting perspective to have from all of it. We've
Amy, I'd
got,
actually,
oh, go for it.
Amy, I'd actually be curious if you know more, because it sounded from what you said earlier that you sort of knew the questions to ask to make sure that data were not being shared inappropriately.
Amy?
I'm sorry, was there a question? I had to step away for a minute.
Oh, yeah, I was saying like it sounded from your experience like you sort of knew what questions to ask to do the checks on sort of how data were being used.
Oh, in terms of, when you're using a platform like that,
Yeah.
when I mentioned, well, I'll be honest, I did it. And then when this one client had, and a few of them have said, has this being confidential, right? And so I went for that particular platform under their privacy. I actually Googled, something about it. And then it took me to their page on like privacy and encryption and how the data is used and all that, because and if I do have any clients that have concerns, but they want to use it, I thought it would be good to be able to send them that kind of link. But any of those platforms should have something in there about their privacy, how the data is used, that kind of a thing. I think most of these that are sort of being used a lot, like maybe this Fathom, I think they've had to get a handle on this, right? But that's a way to do it at whatever platform. I think just make sure you go into whatever, look at their frequent, whatever it is, however you can find that on their platform.
So we're down to our last 5 minutes. For those who had not already saved the chat, now's the time to do it so that all those links and comments and questions and answers come through. And so that should pop up after we close out today's session. But are there any final comments or questions before we wrap this up?
How do you do that, Tiffany? How do I save the chat?
Excellent question. So at the bottom of your toolbar, because we're all on Zoom, if you click on chat itself, it will pop up the window right next to the top of the meeting chat window where it says Career Coaching SIG. There are 3 dots to the right of that, the name of our event. And at the very bottom, let's see, nope, right underneath that. So 3 dots, click on it. The very first option in the menu is to save chat.
And then I just did that, but then where does it come up? Do you have to like cut and paste it into a Word document or something?
It comes up like a spreadsheet, honestly. I have it set up so that mine automatically pops up, but I go to where all my downloads are for Zoom.
Okay.
And I'm doing a screenshot into the chat so that you could see what my menu looks like in case yours is different. But let's go ahead and wrap up. I will have a couple of minutes afterwards, but housekeeping is trying to get into this hotel room, so I'm gonna have to go. But we'll go ahead and wrap things up. I put Dan's link to his chat, to his LinkedIn into the chat, so that you have that. Now, thank you so much, Dan. I do agree. This was informative and I learned stuff and I already was playing around with the tool. So this was super helpful. If you'd like to sign up for this and any other event, definitely join us at icfla.org. I will tell you that next month, so in August, for this particular, for career coaching SIG, we're going to talk about the hero's journey, especially as it relates to career development and the job seeker. So that link is in the chat. You're welcome to join us there. That concludes today's events. I will follow up with you about, thank you so much. I will follow up with you about slides. Dan's going to look them over. And then once those are approved, we'll send you a copy and you'll get the links in your dashboard. So thank you so much for joining us. Woo!